It's more of an inquiry. I want to hear some feedback on what y'all think about. Well, first, if you believe that, in a sense, government to some degree is conspiring against the masses, the populations, and um, if so, or if not, your opinions, and then if so, what you think we ought to do as citizens of this world. What is the most compassionate, the most embracing act that you can conjure up in which you would react to this knowledge? I mean, I do think a part of it is your own development, that by growing, you are enacting in the world the potentials to, for example, stop these sorts of um, ways of being at the highest leadership levels. But that doesn't necessarily stop it. You can become the most enlightened person on the planet and still not necessarily have a big impact on these, some impact I'm sure, but perhaps not a big impact on what's happening um, in the leadership of this planet. I'm very, I mean, I think many of the issues can be coordinated in some sense to the banking governance systems of this planet presently. I don't know if you guys know the story of the Federal Reserve. Um, there's a great book called Creature of Jekyll Island that, I mean, it's somewhat of a conservative perspective on it, but I think there's a lot of historical truth in it, and it's quite profound in the sense that um, how it got started, to some extent why it got started, were quite dark. um, so, for example, in 1913, um, about 7 or 8 of the major um, bankers on this planet, owning and controlling a great deal of the wealth, met on this small island in southern United States called Jekyll Island. And there they came up with this plan, regarding the Federal Reserve, in which um, it would stabilize their interests as bankers. But in so doing, uh, they would be essentially controlling the money system worldwide, really, um, through a close relationship with the government and that banking establishment. Uh, that is, you may well have heard of things like Zeitgeist and so forth. And in there, they give a pretty good explanation of some of these principles, if they're right. And I've researched it a fair bit myself, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. That is, through the Federal Reserve, the government says, okay, I need to build these schools. They go to the Federal Reserve, okay, print me some money, essentially. I mean, they make a signing waiver or something. And then the Federal Reserve makes the money at debt to the government. The government's forced to pay them back. Um, there's the secret tax of inflation always increasing, um, and the value of money is always decreasing through the printing of money by the Federal Reserve at debt. So the Federal Reserve is always collecting this insane amount of interest, and it's even more insane as the system gets further and further into debt because you have to print more and more money to stay out of debt. And you're kind of reaching this exponential rate, this exponential curve at this present time, where the amount of money you print cannot make up for the debt that we're in. So that's roughly, Ron Paul is, again, he's quite conservative, but he's got a pretty good head on himself about this kind of element. I take him very serious in this regard. Um, so getting back to that Federal Reserve, these six or so bankers that already owned, maybe 1/7 of the world's finances met in secret to coordinate this plan to stabilize their interests. And, we're coming to a place where this just doesn't work anymore. And there's so much power, it would seem, if this is right, behind that. They can do almost anything they want, pushing countries into radical poverty, and they have been historically doing that. Again, if someone like John Perkins is right in Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So again, coming from an evolutionary stance, what is the highest principle through which you would act to be an agent of change in this particular situation, where you see this, grip tightening, and, it could go so far as, although I'm not saying it will, a mass genocide, mass killings by the hand of this government system. Again, that's quite speculative, but there's some real potentials to that I take serious, and I think you should too. How should we act? Should we just speak out? I mean, me speaking out in this way on this forum is, if it's true, threatening my life to some small extent. But is this kind of thing something that we should be, putting our lives at risk for? What do you think? What are your opinions? Where do you stand? What kind of action should we take as a collective, Polonic group? Where are we moving?